So I'm going to talk a little bit about Zack Arnold. And I've known him for several years. So he's got a podcast that I learned about years ago. He's got coaching programs. He mentors people, randomly through BCPC. I've seen him, reach out to people and help them. So, I love learning. I've learned so much from him. A lot of this conference was built from the cold email networking techniques that he shares. I had to cold outreach to people about, hey, I'm trying to build this conference, and get advice from them. So I've definitely benefited from the advice that he's given. And, I joke with myself that I spent all this money to make this conference just so I could learn from him. So I'm really happy that he's here today. And, maybe I should have gone the route of his coaching programs. But yeah, he is an experienced film and television editor. And he's worked on Cobra Kai most recently. He's worked on Burn Notice and Empire, documentaries, trailers, when he was first getting started. And he writes a lot about the industry, issues like the strikes that are happening right now. And so I can't think of a better person to come in here today and talk to us about everything that's going on in the industry and how our careers are changing and subject to the dynamics, and how everything is just kind of uncertain right now. There's a lot of unemployment, there's the strikes, there's companies that are kind of downsizing all of the projects that they're doing. So he's going to speak today about how to design your creative career in a rapidly changing industry. And I really can't think of a better person to do that. So let's welcome Zack Arnold. Thank you.
All right. Is this on? Can you guys hear me? Terrific. So first of all, I said this to Reed this morning, and I want to say it to him again, but to everybody here. Reed came to me about a year ago with this idea, and he talked about how we wanted to create this new kind of conference that didn't exist, where we could blend the business of the industry with the craft of the industry, with the networking, with the career development. And his ideas on day one and what this is today are very different. But what I emphasize is that Reed had an idea, and he took action, and all of us are here today learning and connecting with each other. So as much as he's given credit to others, I think he deserves a little bit of credit right now. So, having said that, in a bout of shameless self-promotion, which is actually a teaching tool for today's conversation, he had mentioned how we use my outreach tactics. Free outreach tactics if you just put your name on my email list, and I will send you pages and pages and pages of how I have taught actually many of the people here today how to build relationships to further your career. So random question, show of hands, because I've seen a lot of you today. How many of my students do I have here right now? Okay, so it's a lot of you. It's like over 50% of you. I might be preaching to the choir for some of you. Some of you maybe have seen a version of some of the things in this presentation. This actual presentation is brand new, but there might be concepts that some of you are already familiar with. There are going to be others here that all of this is completely brand new to you. And whether it's the conversation that Janice started today, whether it's the conversation that we've had from Moni about the creative process, or from Jace about AI, how many of you right now are in the space of, I have no idea what to do next with my career, whether it's the strike, whether it's AI, there are all these different things going on. I want to help you navigate the next steps of your career path. First thing I want to do, however, is go way back to the day when I started with Fitness and Post. And I have the dubious distinction of speaking to you at 2 p.m. after you just had lunch, and you were in a presentation for an hour with the lights turned off. So everybody stand up. And I just want you to just shake it out a little bit, okay? I want you to just bounce up and down a couple of times. All right, so be careful of the person next to you. Take one step to your right. So like to the chair next to you, right? And I want you to lift one leg. And I want you to realize how bad all of you are at setting boundaries, because you look ridiculous and nobody questioned me. You may now sit down in your regular chairs. So we are going to talk about how we navigate the unknown of the next stages of our career path. I am not one to just spew the fire hose of information. I'm a big believer in learning and taking action. So I don't expect everybody here is going to fill out a worksheet and do all of it now, but just know that there is an actual worksheet that turns this into an actual exercise where you can synthesize your ideas and you can find more creative ways so you can combine all of your skills, your experience, your passions, and your interests to help navigate the next steps of your career path. So you can see that I've got the little scan code there below. You can scan that. You can just get that Google Doc, and you can keep it for later. If you want to type now, that's great. Most likely, you're just going to want to consume now and then go back to this later. So we all know what it feels like to be on this path and say, I am going to make it in Hollywood. Everybody here, I'm guessing, or most of you are thinking, I'm going to be a successful editor in Hollywood or assistant editor or whatever it might be, and we're all going after that sign. That is our path, right? And here's the expectation that's set. We have to start at the bottom, and we're going to have to climb our way to the top. But we all agree that reality is kind of a lot closer to this, right? And by the way, this is the reality of breaking into this industry before AI came into existence. This is now a 4-dimensional path with so many different tributaries and routes that we don't even comprehend right now. So before AI, this was the reality of breaking into any entertainment or creatively driven industry. It's only going to get more complicated. Kind of looks like that, right? I'm going to date myself here. I'm curious. How many people know what this is? It's like half the room is like, I had one, and the other half is like, what is that? So this is Google Maps 20 years ago. This is what you bought so you could navigate Los Angeles when you moved to Los Angeles. 2002 is when I came to Los Angeles. This is how I learned my way around. So if I were a Thomas Guide manufacturer in 2002, and I look at the direction that we have gone with navigation, am I still in business selling physical Thomas Guides? If I sell Thomas Guides, I'm out of business. What if my business model is I get people from point A to point B? Do I have other options with the next direction that I can take my business or my career? I do, right? So if we're looking at Thomas Guides, which are vastly outdated, if I'm the Rand McNally Corporation, I can still buy my Thomas Guide physically if I want it and I don't want to use Google Maps. But now I also sell navigation tools that are digital, that are much more complex than what you get on Google Maps. I also sell other tools completely unrelated to navigation, but that are about the driving experience. Even cameras, right? The reason being that Rand McNally does not sell physical maps. The Rand McNally mission statement is that we deliver innovative products and services that make journeys better. What you need to decouple yourselves from going forwards is the identity that I am this one thing. Because in the future, that's not where we're going anymore. It's not, I provide this one service. You have to think much deeper about your mission and your impact and be able to create a much larger, more complex narrative around that if you want to be able to move your career forwards, and I'm going to talk about how we do that. So we come back to the path. The beginning of my path was about as far from this Hollywood sign as humanly possible. My path began in a farming community of northern Wisconsin that was, shout out to the cow country, yeah. I was from north of Eau Claire, so you know the rough area. So just to paint the picture, 45-mile drive to the nearest movie theater, 30-mile drive to a traffic light or a subway. People that live in the middle of nowhere visit and they say, you're really out there. We are talking, it is as rural gets. I knew 0 people in Hollywood. It's 0 connections. Didn't know how the industry works, but I knew what I wanted to do. So what did I do? I jumped in my car 6 days after college graduation, like I bet almost everybody did here, and I made the cross-country trek all the way, 3 days, me and my Pontiac's on fire, and I landed in California. And here's what's ironic. The floor that I slept on for my first 2 weeks is 3 minutes away from here walking distance. It's literally right down the block. So my journey that started here 20 years ago, I can walk to that apartment complex in less than 5 minutes. So it's all coming full circle. So a little bit more about me. I know that Reed introduced me, but just to kind of paint the picture of where we're going. Primarily, I have climbed the career ladder as an editor in both features and television. These are some of the credits that I've had over the last 10 years or so. The most notable being that I've worked on the previous 4 seasons of Cobra Kai, and last season I was also associate producer of Cobra Kai. But about 8 years ago, I started to see the tide turning with the industry, and also just me personally, to find more fulfillment. I wanted to start diversifying the way that I was spending my time, the way that I was feeding my creativity, and the way that I was generating income. So I've also been a coach, a writer, and a podcaster for the last 8 years. And as I alluded to earlier, it actually all began with the Fitness in Post podcast. Any OGers that actually listen to Fitness in Post? Ooh, we've got a few. I love it. Nice. You guys are real OGers. The more I talk about this, the less hands I get that people know what I'm talking about. So we come back to this path, and the whole idea of me creating this podcast was understanding what is the secret to success. And what I found after talking to hundreds and hundreds of people on my podcast is that if you ask 100 people what their path is, you get 100 different answers. How many of you have experienced the frustration of this? Where you talk to somebody and they tell their story and you're like, that's great. Doesn't apply to me at all. I have no idea. That's not even remotely useful. That's never going to happen to me. So I've been trying to identify the patterns and the commonalities so that all of you don't have to. So I'm breaking down that success to better understand it. But maybe the problem is I'm human. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to tell me how we can become successful in Hollywood. We're going to warm it up. We're going to start with something fairly simple, which is, what are the steps to become a doctor? How nuts does it drive you that it's just so clear and simple, these are the steps to become a doctor? So here they are according to ChatGPT. I have made 0 edits. You have to obtain a bachelor's degree, you have to pass the medical college admission test, the MCATs, attend medical school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What does everybody see here that's very obvious?
The length of time for each step.
The length of time for each step and the path. Is there anybody here that's unclear about how to become a doctor? Becoming a doctor is incredibly simple. Far from easy, and it requires a tremendous amount of effort, but becoming a doctor is simple. The path is very clear, and it's the same for every single person. So clearly, ChatGPT knows what it's talking about. So let's ask, what are the steps to become a successful Hollywood editor? Let's see. Well, you need a bachelor's degree. You need to get experience. Duh. Oh my God, I had no idea. I've got to learn my editing software. Luckily, it only takes 6 to 12 months. We need to build a portfolio, which only takes a couple of years. Then we need to network. Then we have to find an entry-level position. Oh, and then we need to keep learning and improving. Thank you for attendees today's TED Talk. You now know how to design your careers. Maybe a little bit more specificity, so let's see what it says. Right? Becoming successful in Hollywood is a challenging and highly competitive endeavor, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so we need to build our skills. We need to network. I'm glad it didn't say that we need to put ourselves out there. We need to get experience. Then we need to create a portfolio. Then we need to be persistent. Then we need to stay up to date and be open to opportunities, blah, 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 blah. All the same generic BS advice that we've been getting for years. Thank you, Captain Obvious. We know all of these things. None of that is helpful. How many of you learned in school or otherwise the absolutely necessary skills to properly set your goals and chart a unique path based on who you are, your interests, your experience, and your skills? Anybody take that class in school? It's because that's not the way our education system works. Our education system works to prepare us for the assembly line of life, but the assembly line no longer exists. There is no single path to success in the entertainment industry. However, having talked to hundreds of people about this and being absolutely obsessed with answering this question, I have found that there is a very simple formula. However, in our world, the timeline is anything but guaranteed. And it's that lack of the light at the end of the tunnel that burns so many people out. If we knew we just did 3 short films and then 1 feature film and then X and Y and Z, and it takes everybody 7 years, wouldn't all of us stick with it? Can you imagine telling a second-year med student that if you apply yourself, maybe when you get out of school, you might get coffee for a surgeon for 5 years, and maybe you'll get a chance to cut somebody open someday, but it really just depends on who you know? We'd have no doctors. We'd have 0 doctors, but they have a light at the end of the tunnel. We don't have that. So here's the formula that I have found. Number one, you must have clear goals. This is a core foundation of my program. You must clarify your goals and why they are important to you, because if you don't know why you're pursuing it, you're not going to pursue it with all of the intentionality that you need to succeed, and you are going to burn out, especially if you don't set boundaries, which Janice has already very much hit on, and I don't need to talk anymore about thanks to her. Secondly, you have to become awesome at your craft. This is the one piece of the puzzle that everybody already does, because this is the one fun part. We get to sit in this small dark room, and we get to get on our computers, and we get to learn our craft and our technology and make our stuff. So number two, I'm not going to talk about that at all. And then number three, oh, this is the part that sucks. This is the part that all of us creative introverts are terrified of. The right people must know that we are awesome at our craft. Here's what's changed. I've been teaching this formula for 10 years. One thing has changed because of AI. You bring AI into the equation, and here's how it changes the formula, and I'm going to explain how. Now, we're going to have to become awesome at our crafts. If you think that the world still exists where you get on the bottom rung of a ladder, and you get better over time, and you build more experience, and you build more mastery in one craft, you will not survive the transformation that we are about to see. What you're going to see is the diversification of skills and interests in ways that we can provide value. So if you think that you're going to get to the top of a singular ladder at the end of a career versus multiple careers, that world no longer exists. So this is an example of me creating, and this, like I said, this is something that we could dive into a lot more. So I'm going to very briefly break this down. This is what I would call my version of a diversified career portfolio. So as far as ways that I've made a living and earned money, editor would be one of them, and I've now also diversified as an educator. But that's just the beginning of it. This is just the superficial level. We're going to break this down even further. As an editor, I have cut trailers, I have cut commercials, I have cut documentaries and directed a documentary. I have also cut cable TV shows, mainly in the action space. I've also cut indie features. I've also cut streaming shows, action comedies, most specifically Cobra Kai. I've done network television in the dramatic space, and I've also cut behind the scenes high-level EPKs for studios for their marketing packages. So what I've immediately done in just a couple of minutes is I've diversified potential sources of income from 1 to 8. So that means that a few of these that might get crossed off because of a strike or because technology changes, I'm diversifying, just like you would diversify a financial portfolio. But now let's talk about being an educator. I'm an educator in the sense of being a podcaster, which generates a specific amount of income. I'm also a coach, which is largely what my main business model is now. I am also a LinkedIn learning instructor. Anybody wants to learn Trello, you got to listen to this guy drone on for hours. I've also been a professor in the USC Film School, but beyond just the roles, there are different areas that I've specialized in the knowledge that I share and that I educate. In that, I talk about career development, I talk specifically about time management, I talk about networking, this is a big area of focus, and I also talk about health and wellness. So I have taken 2 things and I've turned them into 16 possible ways that I can generate income. Now, I'm not happy about the fact that our industry is basically shut down, and I'd really love to be working on the final season of Cobra Kai right now. But imagine where my level of anxiety would be at this moment if the only possible way I could generate income was editing Cobra Kai. I would be frozen in fear. But I have 16 different ways on this list that I could potentially diversify the way that I support myself. And even if it doesn't generate income, because not everything has to be monetized, I have other ways to express my creativity. So what we're going to talk about is how you can find the best fit for you to diversify your career portfolio, because my mission statement is not to edit television. It's that I want to help artists, creatives, and storytellers unlock their true creative potential, but speaking of boundaries, without sacrificing their health, their relationships, or their sanity in the process. So there are many ways that I can achieve the same objective. So this is the point where if you want to dive in and you want to get a little bit more interactive, you can either go to that link, you can scan the document, or this is something that you can do later on. But we're going to talk about something that I call the triple tornado technique. This is going to lead to the second mention of Norman Holland for the day, which I'm going to get to in a second. He was the one that devised the tornado technique, and if anybody that knows me, I find something and I throw gasoline and a massive amount of cocaine on it, and I expand it exponentially. So it's now the triple tornado technique with exponents. So this is a very, very small extraction of a workshop that I do in my Build Your Dream Network course. And I've cut the price for everybody here by over half because I know that things are really ugly right now, but I also know that if you want to diversify your career portfolio and you want to build multiple sources of income and you want to meet with people, there's never been a better time on the planet than right now to build relationships. How many of my students have been doing outreach and have found that suddenly everyone is available for lunches and Zooms, right? Because nobody's working. If there's ever a time to build your network, this is the time, and I want to make sure that you have the tools. Now, I want to warn you, this takes me weeks and weeks and weeks to get through all of this with my students. I'm going to do what I can in about 10 minutes. So we are barely scratching the surface of the 1% of what we could be talking about today. So I would say if you have it, find 30 minutes, go back to this, get that link on your phone, so that you can go through this exercise for yourself, but I'm just going to walk through it for now. And if you decide after this that you're ready to take the red pill and you want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, you can ask any of my students. I never shut up about this stuff. Tuesday and Thursday from 8 to 9:30, it's me helping all of my students work through all of this in my coaching and mentorship program. So now let's dive into the triple tornado technique. And by the way, every keynote transition is in here but star wipes. If they had star wipes, you'd see star wipes. So again, I want to mention that this comes from Norman Holland, big giant heart back there from Moni. My goal, if I have one mission in life beyond what I shared, it's that when I'm Norman's age or older and there are 10 of you giving presentations all over the world, you can say I was inspired by this. Norman inspired Moni, frankly, the reason I'm a speaker is because of him. I was just an editor. And he came up to me after I had given a presentation that I'd never done before. He's like, you need to be doing this. You need to be teaching. He was the one that brought me into USC, and he's the reason that I've gone down this rabbit hole. So I could never teach this without at least mentioning him. So here's how this works. There are 3 core areas that we're going to look at. So think this is the overhead view of 3 different tornadoes. The first of one is you need to identify your creative calling. Not going to talk about that at all today. But your creative calling is what work are you really drawn to? What stories do you want to tell? How is the work that you're doing mission-driven rather than just income-driven? So I have a whole exercise to walk you through that. The next one, Janice's specialty. How do I define my priorities and my values and what's meaningful to me? What are my needs? So I can therefore set boundaries. The reason being, once you identify your creative calling and you find something you really want to do, you're going to make the mistake of thinking, God, I love this. I would do this for free. And guess what? People are going to ask you to. You're going to pay something that's called the passion tax. There's actual science that proves the more that you love your job, the more people are willing to exploit you. There's actual science behind this. You identify your creative calling, you're going to pay the passion tax, so you better know what your priorities and values are so you can set boundaries. What we're going to talk about today is the third section, which is how can I maximize my match quality? The intersection of all of the areas that make me valuable and all of the needs that my potential employers and collaborators have, such that when they intersect, it is the perfect fit and mutually beneficial for everybody involved. And at the intersection of all 3 of these is where your dream job lies. So let's talk a little bit about match quality and where this came from. There's a book called Range by David Epstein that talks about why generalists will triumph in a specialized world. It's very dense, but it's also a complete game changer in the way that you look at your career paths. So I highly, highly recommend you read this, but basically match quality boils down to the intersection or the overlap between your past and your present work experience, the skills that you have acquired through all of that work experience or elsewhere, your interests and your passions, and who you are. Oh my God, you mean we actually get to be ourselves and be authentic and true to what we believe as opposed to like hiding in our shell and having all this imposter syndrome and being somebody else because the industry says we have to be? You go through this exercise, you get a much better sense of who you are and how you can be valuable to others. Now, when your match quality is high at any given job, employees are going to be more satisfied with their jobs and perform better. All based on science. I'm not going to dig into all the science and the research. And when match quality is low, employees are less satisfied and they're more likely to leave their jobs and they're also more likely to burn out. Without knowing any of the science or any of the research, how many of you can think of at least one time when the match quality was rock bottom in your jobs? You could do it, and maybe you even did it well, but you're thinking, oh my God, if they weren't paying me, I would never show up again. That's very low level of match quality. And the goal of this exercise is to help you better identify the unique mosaic and intersection of all of the parts that make you, so the match quality can be the highest possible. So a couple of quick fun facts. The deeper that you get into your career paths, the more likely you are to make a major career transition. The average person is going to change careers 10 to 15 times. I'm just going to keep emphasizing this. The idea of finding a career ladder, starting at the bottom and going to the top, doesn't exist. There is no ladder, just like there is no spoon. There's no more ladder. So now let's talk about how AI factors into all of this. According to David Epstein, he says that AI systems are like savants. They need stable systems and narrow worlds. You know something about AI. Is he totally and completely off right now? Dead on, right? So they're very highly specialized. If there were one AI platform, and when we get into AGI, which I'm not going to talk about, that's a totally different story. But as far as AI, it took you, what, 5 tools to do your presentation? Yeah. Is there one tool that you can say, make me a movie or make me a 30-second video? There isn't, right? Like you said, you need to stack them. They're all highly specialized, which means that if you are highly specialized and you can do one thing, you're toast. So you need to diversify your offerings, because that is what is going to give you more of that job security. So relying upon experience, especially in the day and age of artificial intelligence, if it's from one single domain, it's not only eliminating, it is now going to be disastrous for all of us. So we can talk about one of two things. We can either talk about the rise of the machines, but I prefer to be more cautiously optimistic, and I want to focus instead on preparing you for the rise of the generalists, because this is the future of our economy. This is not the future of the post-production editing community in Hollywood. This is the future of our global economy. Now, even though the alliteration isn't quite as good, it should really be the reemergence of the generalist, because before the Industrial Revolution, this is how we lived and survived for millennia. We were all generalists until the assembly lines decided we need to specialize everybody. So this is the reemergence of the way that we evolved and the way we function as human beings for millennia. So I want everybody here to be prepared for the rise of the generalist. So now I'm going to take you through this match quality exercise very, very quickly. And the question we're asking is, what sets you apart from your competition and makes you uniquely valuable? And there are going to be 4 quadrants that we're going to look at. It's going to be Venn diagrams. Don't worry, no math, no quadratic formula. We're going to look at your work experience, your transferable and your valuable skills. This is the piece that everybody misses. We're going to look at your interests and your passions, or in my case, obsessions, because I don't have hobbies, I have obsessions. And also the character traits that make you, you. And in the center of that, the intersection of all 4 of those is where you're the absolute perfect match for your employers and your collaborators. So let's break this down. And we're going to look at this from the perspective of, if I'm filling out this exercise because I've just discovered this amazing new show on YouTube that just came out, that's the derivative of The Karate Kid, which was my Star Wars in the 80s. If I were to do this match quality exercise before my interview, this is how I would fill this out. So the first step is that you're going to list your past and your present work experience. Very simple. So if I were going to do this, and I'm going to look at just work experience in these Venn diagrams, I could say, well, my experience is I'm a Hollywood film and television editor. But as I already described and displayed with that diversified career portfolio, I'm actually a short-form theatrical trailer and TV promo editor. I've done motion graphics and title design, behind-the-scenes featurettes, documentaries, indie features in both drama and comedy, cable series, action, comedy, and drama, network series, drama, musical, and comedy, et cetera, streaming series. So I can break down one potential bullet point into 8 different bullet points just talking about past and present experience. Second step, now this is where we start to dig deeper. Now we talk about what are the transferable and valuable skills that I acquired from all of that experience. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break down the transferable and valuable skills that I've just gotten from what I listed before. This could get much broader. I could spend hours doing this, but right now, based on what I had before, here's some of the hard skills. Some of my hard skills, I'm good at cutting performance. I'm good at cutting music and score. I can cut montages, kind of known for my action montages. I can work with complex nonlinear structures. And I also just happen by happenstance to work on every single thing I've ever done has flashbacks. So that's one of my skills I've acquired. So we're done, right? No, these aren't the important ones. Here come the important ones. Here are my human skills. These are what people call soft skills. And I hate the term soft because it makes them sound less important. It's how we are uniquely human that already makes us invaluable. And with the advent of AI, we're going to be double, tripling, and quadrupling down on our human skills going forwards. So time management is one of the reasons that I get my work done at the quality that I do, is because I get more done in less time. Leadership, I'm really good at managing teams, at least I hope so. I've got a member of my team here, Barry, who is also my assistant on Cobra Kai. Hopefully I'm not completely full of BS. I'm still figuring it out, but I do my best to lead my teams and bring the most out of them and be a leader and not a boss, right? I'm really good at being organized / OCD. I'm also really good with collaboration, and I'm very good at interpreting creative notes. And I'm also very good at working self-sufficiently without supervision, which, by the way, for the right people, is an asset. For the wrong people, that's a liability. It's all about the people that you're collaborating with, but I know this about myself. I know that one of the reasons I transitioned from features to TV, I can't sit with the director for 12 hours a day. Drives me crazy. Give me your notes, give me your thoughts, see you in a week, right? That suits me better. So I know that about myself. That's one of my human skills. Third step, now it gets fun because you get to list your interests and your passions, but more importantly, what valuable skills or even what valuable perspectives on life do they give you? So in this third of the Venn diagrams, interest and passions, I'm going to break it down with one. I could do this with 20 different areas, but my obsession with American Ninja Warrior and Spartan racing has given me the skills of breaking difficult goals into small steps. I've really learned on a visceral level what it means to have the athlete's mindset. I've learned how to develop intense focus under extreme stress. I am good at managing fear and discomfort. And I have faced my physical and my mental limits. Any of my Spartan racers in here today? Yeah, we've got a couple of Spartan racers, right? And you were in my Spartan team, right? Do I just sit there on the sidelines and tell you guys what to do? I'm the first one with their face in the trench under the barbed wire, because that helps me build mental resilience and grit. If I were to add another one and break it down, I also have a black belt in martial arts. I'm not going to break that down into subcategories, but I just want you to get a sense of how this Venn diagram and this mosaic is coming together. Fourth step, let's talk about core character traits. It does not matter in what venue I'm in, whether it's an editor, whether it's an educator, whether it's a dad, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a friend, these traits about me are not going to change. And they are, I am dependable, I am consistent, I am resilient. That word came up before, the grit versus the grind. I am gritty. I will not grind myself to death anymore because I've learned that lesson, but boy, am I gritty. I'm also very, very focused, and I'm athletic. So now let's see how all of this starts to come together. If we take these 4 Venn diagrams and we start to break it down, and again, this is a simplistic version of this, but we have the one Venn diagram where I have 20 years of experience with film and television editing, and I've specialized mostly across multiple genres and mediums in action, comedy, and drama. We look at some of my skills. I'm really good with performance. I'm great with music and score, action montages, nonlinear structure, and flashbacks. Third area, interests and passions, black belt in martial arts, got the athlete's mindset. I understand what it means to face your physical and mental limits, and I understand intense focus under stress. Number 4, character traits. I'm resilient, gritty, focused, and athletic. Any TV shows come to mind where somebody with the intersection of these 4 Venn diagrams might be a good fit and might have an advantage over just about anybody else in the entire industry? The center of that diagram, is there one other show on the planet that's the center of these 4 Venn diagrams than this one? I am not the best film and television editor on the planet. By far, there are way more that are much more adept at the creative side, at the technical side. When I look at myself as an American Ninja Warrior against other Ninja Warriors, and I have, because I've been on the course on the show twice, the reason none of you have seen it is because I suck, and I failed twice. But you take those 2 Venn diagrams, I am not the best editor in the world. I'm not the best ninja in the world. Does anybody here know or know of any editor that works at my level that's better at American Ninja Warrior than I am? Nobody. So when you put those Venn diagrams together, I am literally the best in the world at something. And you start to put all 4 of those together, when you saw that Venn diagram, does it now make a lot more sense? How when I walked into the room for my interview for Cobra Kai, and I constructed this mosaic and I told them this story, they went from who are you and why are we meeting with you to make yourself available, you're hired. Does it now make a lot more sense how I was able to do that? It's because I know how to construct this story and this narrative, of which if you want to dig much deeper, I interviewed all 3 of the showrunners, breaking down my entire job interview in episode 69 of my podcast. And then if you want a bonus, I have also since interviewed both Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka. And they are both geniuses when it comes to mindset and all the things that we're talking about. So if you want a trifecta that's going to send you on your way home today and to work next week, if you have jobs to go to, which I hope you still do, these would be the 3 episodes to get you started and inspired. So now, question for you, based on this exercise, and I know you haven't literally gone through it yet, does anybody have any insights, aha moments, just from watching me do this, where you think something might be a good fit for you that you never even conceived as something to pursue until we went through this exercise? Any aha moments from anybody at all? Anybody want to share anything? Yes?
Well, I like doing food styling and food photography
Mm-hmm.
as a hobby. So I've really been pursuing Chef's Table, for example, lately.
Mm-hmm.
Because I realized that those 2 areas of my life would just be, perfectly in sync with each other if I had an opportunity to work with food and food styling and editing.
All right, so you're interested in food and food styling and things like Chef's Table. What are other skills that you've learned from your experience that when intersected with that are going to make you uniquely valuable more than just about anybody else?
Well, that's a hard question because a lot of the shows I've edited are competition.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, not exactly these beautiful B-roll long shots. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out.
How much do you think the other food photographers that are online on Instagram or wherever understand story or even the production or post-production process even 1% as good as you do?
That's true. They're not really telling the story.
Right? I mean, how many people now, with the explosion of content online, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, where people in our industry, you watch it and you're like, oh dear Lord. Like, do you understand story structure at all? Like, just because you have the button for the transition doesn't mean you use the button for the transition, right? Watch Mr. Beast for 5 minutes. You're going to know what I'm talking about. Listen, Mr. Beast owns YouTube. He's the god of YouTube. It also needs an epileptic seizure warning at the beginning of it because of the way that it cuts, because he cuts based on the algorithm. And I know because I've watched hours of Mr. Beast because my son is obsessed with him. By the way, when Jordan comes up, Hayden or Jordan or whichever is going to be presenting later, they've worked and they've cut for Mr. Beast. I've talked to them about understanding how that process works. The algorithm is telling them how to cut because that's their business model. I have no problem with that. The point is that if we find the unique intersection, right, for you, your level of knowledge with editing and storytelling and post-production, you have a huge advantage over a bunch of other lifestyle food bloggers and photographers. You might not be as good at the photography side of things, but the business side and the creative side, you combine those two, you're going to accelerate that process. And by the way, you don't have to monetize it. You can just combine those things because it gives you creative expression and it makes your life fuller and more fulfilling and enjoyable. But given the current climate, it'd be kind of nice to monetize it, wouldn't it? Right? So I want everybody to think a lot more outside the box about the intersection of all the areas where you can provide value to the world. So now here's a quick cheat code that you don't realize. You go through this exercise, you now have the story points for your outreach emails, for your resume, for your portfolio website, and the most important talking points in your job interviews. So this is not one of those exercises, oh, that was fun, and then I'm going to go home and go back to the way that I was doing things. You go through this one exercise, and that 4-page worksheet, you have something you can refer to for years that's going to help you tell a better story about who you are and how you can be valuable to others. You're welcome. So I want to remind you, this is the tip of the iceberg. I talk about all of this for like 4 hours ad nauseum in my Build Your Dream Network workshop. And because I want to help everybody here, I put together a 50% off, not $15.50, that's half off, because I want to make sure that I can help everybody here. And if you put your email on that clipboard that went around, everything that I would be sending you if you email, put your name on there, is going to be totally free. And again, one more time as a reminder, if you want to take the red pill, this is literally now what I do all day, every day. I haven't opened Avid or cut a frame of anything since March of 2022 because I'm so insanely obsessed about helping everybody here. And again, you think that that's a sales pitch. Ask anybody in my program how much I invest in my student success. If my students don't succeed, I have no business. But I'm so insanely obsessed with helping everybody here because I've gotten where I want it to be. Now I want to help you get where you want to be. But where the business was 20 years ago when I made it, we're in a totally different world right now, and it takes a totally different set of tools. So having said that, if we have any time, which it looks like we have a couple of minutes. Yes, Reed? We've got what, a couple minutes for Q&A? He's not here, so open Q&A until he kicks us out. Anybody have a question for me? Yes?
What do you do if you get kind of pigeonholed into one sort of area of work that you do? Sorry. What do you do if you get pigeonholed into one area or genre of work that you don't mind doing, but you really want to do something else, but your resume really reads like that is what you should do?
I don't know. I've never heard anybody have this problem. This is a really unique problem. Nobody else here has it, right? Everyone here has this problem, and I'm actually going to take a step backwards before I answer the question. I'm going to ask you a much more difficult question. Who pigeonholed you?
I think you're leaning towards me saying me.
Yep.
But I want to say my circumstances.
No, your
it was me.
circumstances had nothing to do with you being pigeonholed. This morning, Janice had a presentation where she had the most important word in the entire vocabulary of boundaries. No. Do you know what word got you to the place where you feel you've been pigeonholed? Yes. If you say yes to the same projects over and over and over, because those are the people in your network, and that's the low-hanging fruit to get the next paycheck, guess what? You've pigeonholed yourself. The industry doesn't pigeonhole you, you pigeonhole yourself by saying yes to the same thing over and over and over. And that's just reinforced because guess what's the easiest for the people hiring you? Hiring the exact right person that on paper has all the right credits and experience and skills. So pigeonholing, ultimately, if you really unravel it and you get to the center of the Tootsie Pop, you know why pigeonholing happens? Because number one, you said yes, and number two, the person hiring you needs to cover their own ass. That's what pigeonholing is about. So the way you overcome it is this exact exercise. You look at all of the experience and credits that you have, and instead of telling the story, here's what I've done in the past, you extract all of the valuable skills that you've done with that experience. Here's how I help you next. So if you think your resume, your website, or the story you tell in an interview is about here's what I've done, you're telling the wrong story. The right story is here are all the skills that I have that make your life easier, and I recognize your problems and I'm the solution. If you can solve the most important pressing problems in my life and you have clear solutions, I don't give a crap what you've done your whole life because you're going to make my life easier. But if the story is, here's everything that I've done in the past, well, then I'm only going to expect that that's what you're capable of in the future. So in order to overcome the pigeonholing dilemma, you have to learn how to recreate the narrative of your story that you're the solution to somebody's problems.
This did make me want to go home and rewrite my resume completely.
Yes,
Completely.
that happens. Ask my students. They should, and I see this happen all the time. First or second week, they come into the program. I really want you to give me some pointers on my resume, and they think I'm going to say, well, move this bullet point to here and change this font size to here. They don't know what the story of their resume is, so I can't help them until they know the story. Once you know the narrative of your resume, then I can tell you where the bullet points go and how to organize them and should it be chronological or not. You also need to know the audience of your resume. Most people don't know the audience of their resume. So if you know the audience of your resume and you know the problems that you can solve, that's a good start to redoing a resume, a website, or preparing for an interview. So I hope that helped. Okay, good. Anybody else? Do I have time? I see Reed just entered the room, so I might get pulled off with the cane. Did he leave again? All right, keep going. Yes.
Appreciate it. In regard to the rise of the generalists that you mentioned, there's this idea that because of that, we eventually might not need a separate person to do color, a separate person to do VFX, a separate person to do mixing. And because of that, if everyone is a generalist, what is your take on the future of creating things?
So this is a really good question. It's also a very existential question. When it comes to the actual technology and the apps, I'm useless. That's where guys like this can completely change the game, right? But here's what we need to consider. Of all the mediums that exist creatively, the most collaborative is filmmaking. If you're a photographer and your entire business is based on your ability to edit raw photography and create images from it, you're in really, really big trouble right now. But let's say that you just want to make your own little tiny film all by yourself. You have all these tools, right? All the things that Jay showed us. You get this stack put together. You can be an independent filmmaker all by yourself, and for a fraction of the cost, you can make a movie or whatever it is way easier and faster than you could before. Is that going to make it better? What makes great movies and television shows great is collaboration. It's the different areas of specialization coming together, and most importantly, it's us questioning each other, right? So if my editor's cut of any given episode of Cobra Kai went out, it'd be kind of disastrous. And I cut a pretty good editor's cut, but it still needs a lot of work. On the flip side, if I were to take exactly the script that was shot on set and I were to assemble it as written, everybody would say, man, I thought those guys were amazing writers, but this is just okay. Like, what they do on the page is amazing, but what's on the page doesn't always translate to the screen. So the collaboration of all of us having our specialized skills is what makes movies and television great. I think what is going to happen, and this is just inevitable, the amount of people necessary to do the same thing is going to shrink. But I don't think we're going to see the elimination of collaboration, because that's what makes our products great. However, I do think there are going to be some people that try to eliminate it, and they're playing the quantity game. And we're already seeing this happening in the journalism and the content creation space and in social media, where, for example, I don't know if anybody knows the tech site Gizmodo. They were releasing AI content, that was not even reviewed by humans, and they got eviscerated for doing it. And you know who eviscerated them more than anybody else? Their employees. Because it makes them look bad. But people are trying to play the content game, the algorithm game. We just want to get as much out there as possible and generate clicks and generate revenue. There are people that are going to eliminate all this and streamline the process, but I by and large believe, no different than all these other major inflection points with technology, the collaborative process is still going to win, but we're going to have to diversify what we're able to bring to the process, because if you're just a colorist, and I say that in big quotes, not to devalue the role, but in the future, if you're just a colorist, you're not going to be able to make a living doing just color. But I also don't want it to be jack of all trades, master of none either, right? So you need to find an area where you can be increasingly valuable, but diversifying the skills of the crafts that bring that unique value. That's really the shift that we're seeing right now. Anybody else have anything before Reed pulls me off the stage with the cane? Do I have time for one more, or are you kicking me out? I've got 5 minutes. All right, well, let's keep going. Yes, sir.
You said it all starts with goals. What if you can't or are afraid to establish goals?
Ooh, those are two very different questions. What if you can't or are afraid to establish goals? If I could hit one of them, which one do you want me to hit? You can't or you're afraid to, and I know which one's more important. You're afraid to, right? This is another area that we talk about in the program all the time. This is not, here's the framework for setting your goals, and here are the 5 questions you need to answer, and we're going to use the SMART framework to set our quarterly goals so they're specific and measurable and actionable and relevant and time sensitive. All that's valuable, but it's also boring as hell, right? If you really want to achieve goals that have meaning, you need to be willing to confront your fears. So I can't give you the framework for how to confront all of your fears to achieve your goals. But I want to give you what, for me, was the fear of God, which is, are you more afraid of confronting the fear that's stopping you from achieving your goals? Or are you more afraid of ending your life, realizing that you never tried? I'm more afraid of the latter. So I want to figure this out, and I want to confront my fears. Do you think that I naturally stepped up to any American Ninja Warrior obstacle and said, this looks easy. I am not afraid at all. They're terrifying. People watch American Ninja Warrior on TV. That looks fun. I'd like to try it sometime. I would love to see any of you try it, because in the real world, it is a completely different ballgame. I trained for 5 years. I still haven't gotten through an obstacle. 5 years! It's really hard. But when I look at having set that goal, what I've learned is that it's not about reaching the destination, it's about the person that I became because I set such an audaciously stupid goal. So when you set that goal, think about what are the side effects, right? My health, my physique, my energy, my mindset. All of these things have completely transformed because I'm a failure. It was because of the quality of the goal and the systems that I built to achieve the goal. So there's a whole lot more to this, more frameworks, more strategies. But at the end of the day, when you put your head on the pillow at night, are you more afraid of facing your fears or more afraid of ending your life knowing you didn't try? That's the question that keeps me moving forwards. Anybody else? I think we probably got time for one last one. Or have I just sufficiently scared everybody enough here? All right, so I guess we'll leave it at that. Enough existential crises for one 45-minute presentation. So, all right, well then, on that note, I appreciate everybody listening. Thank you very much.